So,
welcome in Arad.
well, I say you welcome in Arad. And I'm Dan, I'm a professional tour guide here. I work in this region. I live in the city of Arad, but I also cover the region around. And I'm very happy to guide you today through this beautiful city that, yeah, unfortunately locals don't really treasure. I'm gonna tell you on the way how it goes with that.
While we were going through Arad, we were amazed of beauty of the city. We came here by night and it was amazing.
Yes, it's a great place, and luckily for me I get to see it through the eyes of you, my guests that are coming from outside. So I'm much more optimistic.
So what will you tell us today about this beautiful city?
Well, we're going to see the main highlights from Midtown, and we're starting here in front of the building that we can call the new City Hall. We don't have the old one anymore, but actually at some point in the second half of the 19th century, the center of the city shifted from where is now behind the theater. That was the main place, and then as they built this beautiful building that we see here, they moved to the north to this part of the city. So we're gonna learn about the city of Arad. You're gonna see that it's not an old city. It hasn't been a medieval city. We know about the place being told in the old recordings from late medieval times, but we don't know exactly where the settlement was.
Wow.
So what you see here around has a connection only to mid-16th century. So 1550 around, we have a Turkish fortress, and around the fortress then also slowly evolved a civilian settlement, and then from there on we have a perfect connection to this day, to this day. So I'm going to explain to you why we have this beautiful architecture. Everything has a reason, you know. You're passionate about history, and you know how things merge
yes,
in these things.
I'm very curious who made Arad so beautiful.
Well, we're going to find out on the way.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. So we're inside the current city hall of Arad. The building was finished in 1876, according to architecture, I think they also added some things later on, because we have a lot of vegetal stuff around here which have more to do with the Art Nouveau movement that came later. We're very proud that we have a building that was planned initially by a famous architect from Hungary, Lechner Odon, who later on became the father of the Hungarian secessionist movement, like the Hungarian Art Nouveau, if you like. Unfortunately for him, he didn't get to give his plans to the building later on, as they were lacking on budget. A building that normally should have had 2 stories and also a closed courtyard, like a proper palazzo, as money was not their disposal. They had to reconfigure everything, and then a local architect made what we have now. Like they skipped one of the floors, and also we're gonna go behind, and you see it's a U-shaped building. But what we have here, luckily for us, it's an interior that got restored some 10 years ago. And in the history of more than 100 years that we have here, this was the first proper restoration. Like, this was the first moment when they looked to give the original colors back, and the original layout. In communist times, they did some repaintings, if you like, but they weren't that accurate in restoring. So I'm very happy to show you this, I would say, newly restored building. 10 years in a history then that goes back more than 150 years is still something. So I propose we go up, and I'm going to show you the main council hall, where most of the things around here happened. So, how about this one?
It's amazing. It's really very, very like in palace.
Yes, I must tell you, so though we are now in Romania, to be honest, most of the things that we're going to see through Midtown, including this beautiful building, were made as the city was part of the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy. Yeah, like I said, 1876, and probably the majority of buildings that we're going to admire were made from the 1870s up until World War I. So this has much to do with the Hungarian and German heritage of the city. Yes.
This could be, as you tell me, the buildings are from this period. This must be a best time for Arad.
Yes, you're right.
What was the reason?
It was a time of relative peace. From the 1870s up until World War I, we didn't have major conflicts around here. And then also we have what we call the second industrial revolution. Like we missed the first. That one, you can forget about it. It was in Britain. But together with electrical motors and the second industrial revolution, Arad started to become an important city in this area. Up until then, the main richness were the fields around. It was agriculture. But as industry started growing, the city was making real money. And that's why they could expand, and also the real estate development that we have by the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th, that can be seen as we were going to walk around.
What they produce in Arad?
Well, they produce all kinds. Probably the biggest factory that comes to mind is the wagons factory. Like they produced also for trains, train wagons. They produced also freight wagons, and then also passengers wagons. And at some point they even produced a benzo-electric wagon that was sold all over Europe. That became famous. Like a small engine. But apart from, you can imagine that they got at some point in which they wanted to show that they can produce anything in here. And we're going to talk about that later when we get to the next palace. But here, what you see around, it shows the glamour of those times, the 1870s and later on, as what you see regardless of the age. This is not cheap. So this costs a lot of money, and you need good people, good craftsmen who can do what you see here around. Now, the council hall bears the name of King Ferdinand I. He's not much related to Arad.
But first Romanian king?
First Romanian king after they unified Romania after World War I. So when they renovated this place in 2013, I said they finished it. It was some 5 years before the centenary of the unification, which was 2018. And they gave the name of the hall to King Ferdinand. Otherwise, he was only once here in 1923. He was literally here. He visited several places in town, but also he was here to meet the city officials. Normally, as you can see the layout, it's used for, so this is now for like a conference. But if they bring the tables in and they install all the microphones, then they use it for the initial purpose for the council that meets here minimum once a month. And also if they bring the chairs out and they install some cocktail tables, they also do receptions here, mostly organized by local authorities, but also as a private person or like a company you can, I wouldn't say rent, because they don't want any money for it, but you can use this hall in purposes like that. And of course they do weddings here.
Yes.
Yeah, like the civil part of the weddings. So, have a look. You can salute the people. There are not that many. This is the place where every city has something like this. This is the place where people come if they have something to celebrate or if they're angry on someone. In the past 35 years, since Romania turned into a democratic country, well, honestly, they were coming more for protests than for celebrations. Otherwise, the square is called Revolution Square, because much of what happened in 1989 during the anti-communist revolution in Arad happened here. People talking to those who gathered, to workers that gathered in front of the city hall, their leaders were talking to them from this balcony. Well, this is also why in the middle we have a monument that looks like a candle, and on top of it, if the wind helps us a bit, we're going to see it's a flag, a Romanian flag with a hole in the middle, a symbol of the revolution, because we had a communist coat of arms on it. And when they started the revolution, people, they cut off the coat of arms, showing in a way that they are still adherent to national symbols like the flag, but they don't want to have the communist ones on the flag. So now our flag looks normal, we don't have that hole in the middle anymore, but that's why we have that flag there to remember that special symbol from the times of the revolution. Otherwise, it's not a proper square. You can see in the middle we have this big boulevard, which actually is the heart of Arad. It has much to do with the fact that Arad was a marketplace on the lower Mureș, on the river. This Mureș was the main connection from Transylvania to Europe in past times, as with no roads, you know, most of the transportation was done on water.
Yes.
And being on the lower Mureș, we're only some 100 km away from where the Mureș flows into the Tisza. That's happening in Hungary, and here it was a marketplace. And as a consequence, the city evolved here, and also as a consequence, the boulevard appeared. I'm going to explain you that a little bit later. About the buildings around, you said that you noticed that we have beautiful buildings. Yes, we have a lot of buildings like that one. The big one, we call them palaces, but they were actually residential buildings. So buildings that were erected by rich people or companies to be given out for rent. And this also has to do with that development that I mentioned earlier, that industrial development. As industry was growing, people moved from the outskirts of the city into the city. They needed housing, and those who were having means to invest in this real estate business, they did. Like that one there. It's called the Neumann Palace, after the most famous Jewish family in town, who were people who made business with, they had factories, they made a lot of charity, they built a lot of important buildings in the city, but you know, sometimes we're more superficial, and we remember them because the last heir of the family, he was the founder of the local football team. And yeah, you know how it goes. And this was one of their real estate businesses, you can tell. A palace that goes on 3 streets, so it's a huge building, with the lower, so the first part, the first floor. So it's not the floor. Come on, with the
ground floor.
The ground floor, yeah. The ground floor is used for economic reasons, like shops or restaurants, commercial reasons, you can say, and then the upper floors were used for housing. But this is the characteristic for most of the buildings here in Midtown. They were trying to gain profit from several sources. This one, the other one there with the columns,
yes.
That one was a bank. And yeah, you know a lot of stuff, because you to produce your clips, you have to do. You have to learn a lot of stuff, but maybe I can teach you on. Have a look on top of the pediment. Yeah, on top of the pediment there's a formation that's a beehive, but it's not.
Yes,
it's a beehive, like, as you know from medieval times and from the antique. It's not the square one that we use today. Well, wherever you see beehives. And you can play this at home, because it was a symbol widely used in the 19th century. Those were banks. So that one was a bank. The building was made in 1910, and then it was used by the Romanian National Bank up until 2015. It was last year that they used it.
Yes, honey was extremely expensive, so the connection was...
Yeah, there's a symbol.
And
yeah.
A lot of labor, so...
Yeah, I would like to say something about the stained glass windows. You can see them, they're beautiful, and now as we have a bit of sunlight from outside, They literally glow. But these were made some 100 years after the building was finished. So these were made in the 1970s. And they are about time. It's the theme of time. The local artist who made this also had similar works done in the palace that now is the official residence of the Romanian president in Bucharest. And the sides, you can see ladies dressed up like the months. You start with cold colors for winter, January, February, and then you go to spring, and then on the other side you have summer, and we come back to winter. And in the front are the seasons, like spring, summer, fall, and winter. And in the middle you have Kronos, father of Zeus, and the god of time. Yeah. And there's also an urban legend, you know. Tour guides do that, they tell urban legends. Well, I studied history, I tell the legends and then I also explain the things because sometimes are nonsense. Well, in this case it's actually a cute one. People say that the artist gave his face to Kronos, and you can check that on the internet because he looks pretty much alike. But we don't know the ladies. People in town say that these were his loved ones from his youth. We don't know their names, so we can't check them out. But as you can see, he either had a good taste in women, or like all men, he was bragging, because we'll never know. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Very interesting is the technique. So the ladies are made, it's a modern stained glass technique. It's actually glass that's been painted. Have a look. And that puzzle of glass pieces of different colors that you're familiar from Gothic mosaics, for instance, or Gothic stained glass windows, that's on the upper side of the composition. But the lower side where the ladies are, it's glass that's been painted. Here we have the citadel of Arad, which is across the Mureș in that direction, where the green dot stands. And when they built this was from 1765 to 1785, approximately. A fortress like this needed a firing range, an empty space around it. You know, in medieval times as well, fortresses didn't have any trees or any buildings around. And the same principle was applied here as well. The problem is that the city was already forming in this area close to the fortress. And the army wanted to move the city further away to the north. And then Joseph II came, and that's why he became some sort of local hero, because he decided that the city stays. In Hungarian it rhymes, Arad Marad, Arad stays. But the thing was that though they stayed, they weren't allowed to build high buildings. And this restriction was lifted first 1817 by Franz I when he came over here. And since then, they started building, but they built it from the south all the way to the north. So from the former square where we're heading towards the new city hall that we have here. And this is why, as they reach this area, everything around, it's architecture from La Belle Époque, from the 1870s onwards, like historicism, that eclectic style that binds several architectural styles, and then Art Nouveau. What we have here, it's more eclecticism, more historicism, but we're also going to see some Art Nouveau on the way.
Amazing how the city evolved due to conditions here.
And also notice this boulevard, this axis, because we're going to talk about it. I've told you from the balcony, this is the heart of the city.
What's the celebration here?
I don't know, they probably finished high school or something like that. So we're in front of the Cultural Palace. This is how this place is called, and it's a building that was finished in 1913. And back then it was about to house three important cultural institutions, like the local museum, the local philharmonics with their concert hall that we're going to see in a moment, and also the library was here. In the meantime, the library moved out, but the concert hall, like I said, is still here, and also the museum, it's in the back. The building is remarkable also from an architectural point of view, because it's a total mix of architectural styles. You can see here, it looks like a Greek temple.
Yes,
it's neoclassical. That tower looks a bit oriental, if you like. Then the sides are very rhythmic, like in the Renaissance and the Baroque. The back, it looks Gothic, like a castle. We're going to go and see it. And inside, it bears the features of Hungarian secession, so Hungarian Art Nouveau. So we're going to see a lot of colors. We're going to see all kind of mild shapes specific for Art Nouveau, but also some geometric shapes, because in 1913, Art Nouveau, it's turning into its ripe phase. It's becoming more geometric, which later on, after World War I, comes out as Art Deco. So yeah, let's try and sneak between the young men here, okay, and go and have a look. So have a look around. This is what I meant. Yeah, this was also restored some years ago. For the Eurosceptics, the money came from the European Union, you know. Yeah. So it did us a lot of help, and I know Poland made some remarkable investments, and you're an example in what it means to use the resources. We are not that good, but anyway, you can see it's a beautiful interior, and have a look on top. There we have the solar system. Yeah. And this extra star you have there, it's the Halley comet. As they were working on building the palace, the comet visited them. They were working from 1910 to 1913. And then when they made the solar system, they put the Halley comet on it. Wow. If you look closely, it's a total nightmare for an astronomer, because on the side you see the astrological signs. So don't get into any arguments with an astronomer about astrology. So I've told you earlier about that pride of the local craftsmen, that they wanted to show that they can produce everything. So imagine that as they were building this cultural palace, in the same time in Târgu Mureș, Marosvásárhely, in Transylvania, they were building another cultural palace. Both mostly were financed by the Hungarian state, by the Ministry of Culture from Budapest. But as in Târgu Mureș, they got the national assembly of artists. They got some great architects from Budapest and all kind of artists that were creating secession works, the best that Hungary had to offer at that time. Here in Arad, they wanted to show we can make everything our own. So everything was done by local industrymen, by local craftsmen. The hall that we are now in, Arad had a very long tradition in matters of music. They had a conservatory in the 1830s, 1837, one of the first 10 conservatories in Europe. And then the Philharmonics was founded in the 1890s. But they didn't have a proper concert hall. So that's why when it was questioned to build this palace, they wanted also to build a proper concert hall. They took as a model the Hungarian Music Academy concert hall in Budapest, and this is a reproduction of that concert hall in Budapest. But not everything looked in the beginnings as it does today. The plan was to install an organ, but remember the building was finished 1913, then World War I came. After World War I, Arad became part of Romania, and it was not the proper time to do investments, because most of the countries in Europe were struggling in matters of economics in the 1920s. So only 2017, when they restored this building, was also finished with the organ, which was made by a company from southern Hungary, from Pécs. Now it's one of the biggest organs in Romania. We have, I think, only some 2 or 3 concert halls that have such big organs. And it's a rare thing to hear an organ concert with a full orchestra, because normally, if you go in a church, you can't fit the full orchestra, and yeah, it's quite a special thing. So the architect that made the building was a local Hungarian guy. I've told you, Arad was mostly Hungarian before World War I. And also he was a member of the Philharmonic, so he got to play the violin inside the hall that he designed. And I want to point you this, the name here, because every country has neighbors with which sometimes they had debates. Here we had a lot of controversy with Hungary, and unfortunately in communism this got promoted a lot, like the Romanians, and especially those who didn't have anything to do with Hungarians were very scared about Hungarians and Hungarians with Romanians and so on. But now there's never been an issue around here. We've been a mixed population, and we're very happy that we've been European since always. And have a look how you can settle in a sentence Romanian and Hungarian. Because if you're Romanian, you're reading architect Ludovic Szantai, and if you're Hungarian, instinctively you read architect Szantai Lajos. In Hungarian, the family name comes in front of the first name, and they wrote it like this. We have in villages around here where we have mixed population, even streets made like this. And on the same shield you have it like a number, and then on top of it it's written STR, like street in Romanian, and down it's utca in Hungarian. And instinctively each one reads whatever they want, and everyone is happy. Right. This is the Mureș, Maros in Hungarian, Maris in Latin, if you like. So it's been here before us, that's for sure.
Yes, as I learned the history of Romania, this river was used by Roman legions to invade Dacia in the first century.
There you go. And now we have a beautiful promenade on the riverbank, and the city, being a flat city, being in this flat plain, is very good for commuting. I wouldn't say we have many bikers or so, but it's very well suited for something like that. And you can see here bike paths. There we have a biker. I also do inline skating here, and it's a beautiful place. And we have this chain of parks that goes all along the riverbank. And on the other side, if you can imagine, the Mureș was for some 20 years or so the border between two big empires in this area. On our side, where we are now, this was the Austrian Empire, the Habsburg Empire, and then on the other side, for some 20 years, from the 1700s up until 1718, were the Ottomans, were the Turks. And now what we have on the other side, it's another region that we call Banat, and the center of Banat is Timisoara, the city that last year was European Capital of Culture. We are observing from here the biggest Catholic church in town, and it's so big that locals call it the Catholic Cathedral, which is not. So it's never been and probably never will be a cathedral. The cathedral sits in Timisoara, and we are part of the Diocese of Timisoara. But this beautiful church here was made in 1903, and this now also makes a reference about that mixed world that I mentioned earlier. The biggest Catholic church in town was made by an Orthodox Serbian architect. And it shows the open-mindedness of people that lived here. So they didn't care that he's Orthodox, he was good, he had a great plan, and have a look. A beautiful church that bears a lot of features from the Neo-Renaissance, also some Baroque embedded into it. We're going to go inside, and I'm going to show you a small architectural trick that he used. You see how well he made this ensemble, because also the buildings on the sides are part of this complex that we call the minaret complex. And the church is perfectly aligned to the boulevard, and it's a huge church, you're going to see. you're gonna see that small trick, which I find very, very interesting. You can't tell from outside, we have to go in.
Okay, let's go.
Have a look. It shows the power and the money that they were having in 1903 when they decided to bring down the old Baroque church that was standing here and to erect this. And well, the pillars are not marble. We're not that rich, you know, we're not in Vatican. They look like, but it's not. This place, back then, being an important city for the Hungarian heritage, because the revolution from 1849-1848 ended up close to Arad in Syria, where we also have a medieval fortress. And in the aftermath of the revolution, the Austrians executed 13 generals of the Hungarian army in Arad. Since then, the city became very important for Hungarians. So now the government from Hungary is financing school trips to important places. And I think you can't be a student in Hungary and finish school in Hungary without minimum visiting Arad once. Alongside other important places from Hungary or outside Hungary. So Arad is considered very, very important for Hungarian history. And when they made this, the architect, though he was a Serbian Orthodox, as I told you, he put 13 sets of pillars, 13 pillars on each side, one for each general that got executed on October 6th, 1849. So there are a lot of symbols inside. The patron of the church is Saint Anthony of Padua. We see him depicted on the main altar, again made by a famous Hungarian painter, Vastag György, and here you can see Saint Anthony. It's very interesting, on Saint Anthony Day, on every Tuesday, you know, they have a canteen for poor people, and that bread that is given as an offer to Saint Anthony in the end ends up being used in the canteen for people who need help.
Very nice tradition.
We as people, we see the relationship with divinity, with God, as being very human. Like, I ask you for something, you give me something, and I say thank you. And this one here, this is the oldest statue that we still have in Arad. It's a Nepomuk, a Saint Nepomuk. In 1726, he was adopted as the protector of this region because they were having a lot of trouble with plague back then. And the statue traveled through town. It was put on stage in different places. And lately, I think it was beginning the 2000s, when they decided to bring it inside. First, it's sandstone, so it lost a lot of texture over time because of the weather. Second, I don't know why, it got hit by local plague, in this case the football supporters. They destroyed it on several occasions. The last time, I think the head went off. And then the church said, okay, guys, we bring the original inside, and instead of it, we'll put a copy, this time out of marble. Let's see how they break that. Which they did. So we have a copy, we have a copy of it somewhere in town. So now I'm going to show you that architectural trick that I mentioned earlier, that was used by Milan Tabakovic, by the architect that made this place. And, well, we're right in the middle of it. Have a look. We are in the middle of a round corridor, a round pronaos, if you like. This is how this place is called in a church. And have a look. Normally, if you enter a church from the main entrance, you look straight and you see the altar. But here, everything runs sideways. And how did he cover this? He made this round corridor. And as you enter into a round space, you lose orientation for a moment, and you forget that actually you should go straight and not sideways. Why did he do this? the street nearby runs diagonally. And the old church, the Baroque church that was here, was going straight, hitting the street. To make a bigger nave, to make a bigger church, he needed to go parallel to the diagonally street. So that's why he made this corridor. Furthermore, think about it, that beautiful tower that we saw from outside, it's here, it's above us. And I've mentioned that the building has a lot of Renaissance, of course Neo-Renaissance in his time embedded into this place. This, if you take as a unit, what we have here, this round corridor with the tower above, is like a small tempietto. It's the round church that every architect in the Renaissance dreamt of to build. So he couldn't do it entirely, because in 1903 the Catholic Church is very strict about building centrated churches. But I think, I don't know if he thought about this, but he made it so beautifully, and he managed to merge all these features into this beautiful church that we have here. This is also an interesting story. So here we have several memorial plaques. The first one was taken from the old building that was here, and it says about the visit of Joseph II, son of Maria Theresa, and later on he was Emperor of Austria, to Arad. The second one is the consecration plate that was made in 1903 when they made this church, and there you can see that it says to God's mightiness, and also to the heroes from Arad, mentioning those 13 generals that were executed. And speaking about generals, this one is interesting, because I was telling you about 13 pillars, 13 generals. Well, there were more. And here we have 3 additional generals that were convicted together with the 13, but they were not, so they were sentenced to death as well, but they were not executed the same day. They got postponed. Actually, one was executed in August, so before, and the other 2 in 1850, 2 years later. And because they were not executed together with the other 13, history forgot them. And this is an irony. I mean, you get to die for your country, and people forget you out of practical reasons. So that's why the Catholic Church made this monument here in 2003 to remember the lost 3 generals. Actually, there's another additional one, but the guy was Calvinistic, and you know, Catholic Church doesn't really match with that. So they made a monument for him in the local Calvinistic church. So we saw the statue of Nepomuk, which I've told you, it's connected also to those plague epidemics that they were having here in the beginning of the 18th century. They also erected plague columns. They are Baroque columns. We have several also in New Arad, the neighborhood, we have one. But the one from Old Arad, where we are now, at some point they lost it. They lost part of it. And when they decided to rebuild it, 1901, they wanted to make it more modern. So the main theme of these plaque columns is the Holy Trinity. And you can tell here the Father, the Son, on top of that bowl which symbolizing the universe, and on top of the obelisk, it's the Holy Spirit.
It's shining.
Yeah. Again, I've told you that the biggest Catholic church was projected by a Serbian architect, by an Orthodox. This one, a Christian symbol, commissioned by the city for the Catholic Church, was made by a Jewish artist from Budapest. Rona Joseph, back then, 1901, he was so famous in Hungary, everyone wanted to have something from him. The monument was placed here, but in the 1970s, the communists, you know, they didn't very much liked symbols like these, and they demolished it, and only 2007 was bought back. Let's go behind, because there you have the years, 1903, 1970 and 2007, I think. When they erected the first column, 1901, when this one was first erected, and 2007 when it was rebuilt. Yeah. Here we were back on the main boulevard of Arad, and I took you here to see this building that used to be the building that housed the local regional government, you could say that, in Arad, like the prefecture of Arad. And this is important for Romanian history, because here, where the balcony stands, where you see those flags, we have a room, a hall, where 2 days after the World War ended, Romanians and Hungarians met to decide what to do with these territories and also with Transylvania. Before that, these territories were part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, but as Austro-Hungarian was on the losing side, it was a vacant, and they didn't know what to do. Of course, the Romanian, out of national reasons, they wanted to join the Romanian kingdom, but the Hungarians came to convince them to stay in Hungary. And after 2 days of discussions, the Romanians decided to join the Romanian kingdom. Of course, it was only a local decision, because honestly, without the support of the big powers and the peace treaties in Paris, this wouldn't have happened. Both sides, you can imagine, both Romanians and Hungarians wanted to keep the territories. The ones who really decided were the big ones when they settled things after World War I by the peace treaties.
But this was the, I think, biggest shift in this region for the borders.
Yes,
because
definitely.
Hungarians were here from 10th century.
You're right.
And then they lost all this territory.
That's a thing, and it's very important to say that, and unfortunately in communism, you also unfortunately lived in a country that had a lot of trouble with communism. We had the nationalistic propaganda, and not many people understand that Romanians, they were around, but we didn't have institutions, we didn't have statal institutions. Like when the Hungarian kingdom came, there were some small knights, but it wasn't a kingdom, it wasn't a big state around it. That doesn't mean that Romanians were not around, but you're right, since around the year 1000, this place was more or less ruled by Hungarians, then came the Ottoman Turks, then came the Habsburgs, which together with the Hungarians ruled this place. So literally Romanians, they got to govern this area only after World War I.
Yeah. No one now remembers this. Not many people remember it today.
It's complicated to put into context, because it seems what you see around this way of being, that it's been here since forever. You will see, we will go in a moment to see the biggest Catholic church in town. And to this day, I got groups from Romania that come and they ask me, why is it written in Hungarian on the Catholic church? They say, well, because 100 years ago, most of the people living here were Hungarians. We were peasants, we were living in the villages around the city, but in the main city, we were a minority.
Yeah. But because of that you were peasants, as you say, you lived in the Carpat mountains and you preserved your culture, your language.
This is the best idea that we have. You're right. You're perfectly right. This is the best idea about how things work. Because we know that after the Roman legions left in 270 approximately, when they retreated, a population was left behind which was speaking some sort of Latin, something that had to do with Latin. We don't know exactly how it sounded. And then we go over that millennia of migrations in which all migrating people were coming from the east, and we know the characteristic. This is why urban settlements all over Europe, we don't have them anymore in those times, because everyone was coming to plunder. Everyone was going through the flat terrains of the field, of the plains, and that Latin-speaking population. Our idea is that they survived in the mountains, and then we come in the 6th century when the Slavs came, and the Slavs, they settled partially on the nowadays Romanian territory, then also in the south, from where we have Yugoslavia, of course. And the Slavs were special. The Slavs were the first from the migrating people which they stayed here. the Slavs were different because they were the first from that series of migrating people that decided to stay, decided to become a European people. Later on they became Christians and so on. And as the Slavs occupied, let's say, the lower parts of the country, the fields, and you were still having that Latin-speaking population in the mountains, over the coming centuries, they somehow merged. This is why, first of all, Romanian is special, because though it has a Latin base, some 60% of the word are Latin, it has some 30% Slavic words. And second, as the Slavs settled in Romania and all around Romania, the Latin-speaking population from here got isolated. There was an island of Latin-speaking people which was surrounded by Slavs and Hungarians, because they're special. So we're sitting in front of the theater. Jan Slavic was a writer, a classic that was born in the vicinity of Arad. And the theater building was made at the same time as they did the city hall, from where we started our story in midtown Arad. And this was also partially the cause why they had to cut one of the floors from the city hall, because the municipality was making two major buildings at the same time, and it was too much. But unfortunately, like all theaters, this also burned twice. Like
whole building?
Yes, yeah. You know, in the 19th century, up until I would say the 1920s, as inside they didn't have in all the places electricity, or sometimes they did stupid things, because the second fire that we had is because of a human error, and theaters, they burned all over the place. That's why they installed that iron curtain, you know, the metaphor used by Churchill, and unfortunately both you in Poland and we in Romania, we were on the wrong side of it, but that metaphor comes from theaters, where the curtain sits on the stage. Next to it there's a fireproof curtain, a very heavy one, which in case of something, of a fire, it isolates the backstage from the main hall. So at least you save some of it. And some actors sometimes they're afraid to play underneath that iron curtain, because it's huge, it has a few tons, and well, I don't think you have a chance of surviving it if something goes wrong and it falls on you. But this is the thing with fires. So here it's interesting. Here it's interesting the second fire, and that one happened in communism already in the 1950s, 1957 I think it was, and people from Arad say how they did a renovation of the interior, and because the president of Romania back then, officially he wasn't called president, he was president of the Communist Party, but anyway, he was supposed to come for the inauguration, and to dry the paint they heated so much inside that the central heating system, from there they started the fire. So something went wrong with the central heating system, and it started a fire. And from there we have the theater as it looks today, because the entrance to the theater hall, it's done from the side. Here in the front they were having restaurants, and it was a commercial place. And only from the 1960s they made the entrance from the main boulevard. And also have a look, it will look very familiar there, the style,
Working people.
Yes, of course. So the pediment was back then in the 60s decorated with the famous socialist realism, or realist socialism if you like. We have it all over the Eastern Bloc, a style which it's still very appreciated in Romania. I've told you, our peasant ancestry, and people wanting to recognize what they have in front of them. They don't really appreciate modern art, you know. This is far more appreciated than modern art. We enter a bit in also I said earlier about Art Nouveau and the Hungarian secession and so on, and we enter a bit into architecture with this building that we have on the main boulevard. Of course, this was also made for housing. Finished 1913, And here we talk about the second phase of secession in Arad. The beauty of this building comes from its volumes. You can see the alternation of balconies and how many different shapes were embedded to make this beautiful building. There aren't so many ornaments. If you remember the interior of the cultural palace with all those leaves, have a look here. We have some there, the frieze there is decorated, but not as much. The beauty comes here from the volumes. And if you want to come here and have a look at the street, you can see how beautiful bow windows and ironwork balconies with masonry balconies are alternating, and also the different shapes that are giving this beautiful site to this building. I'm very happy that they restore it. I thought they will never start because it's big and it's expensive. It costs a lot. I brought you here to show you this building because traditionally we think that this is the first secession building, the first Art Nouveau building that we have ever built in Arad. This was also made by the same Serbian architect that made the Catholic Church, the guy Milan Tabakovic I mentioned earlier. And the building belonged to a pharmacist. That's why we have here these beautiful faces of Hippocrates, Hygiena, and Aesculapius. The volumes here are not that spectacular, like we saw at that building from 1913. This was made around 1899. So we can call this is the first phase of secession around here, but here the ornaments are more abundant. And you see ornaments that relate to nature again, a lot of leaves, a lot of branches, flowers. So I would say this is the first phase of secession in this area, and what we saw earlier, that was the second phase. It's very also interesting, the story of the pharmacist. He developed around 1895 a cream. I'm not specialist in those ones, but I've heard it was a night cream, so fatty cream that ladies put on their skin overnight. I don't know why it helps, but anyway, it's not my thing. And he made that cream and made it very successful. He did advertising, and some people say that even in America he sent that cream. We don't know, you know, people talk all kind of things which we can't prove, and yeah, these are local legends. Anyway, from the money that he made with this cream, he could afford to build this and to hire that architect, which, well, I don't think it was that cheap. The guy was very much in his prime.
Wow, this tower looks very old.
Oh, it does, but it's not that old.
No, it's not medieval.
It's not medieval. No, I know that you have your eyes very well suited for recognizing medieval stuff, but it's not medieval. And I wouldn't say unfortunate. That's the old water tower of Arad.
Water tower, very beautiful for a water tower.
Well, it was finished in 1896, so totally not medieval. But the architect, William Dunn, a Scotsman, he was specialized in restoring old castles. And this was the only utilitarian building that he made. And well, the guy, he was into castles, and you can tell that. So that was the water tower. It's still nowadays used, but now as a museum. Luckily, after 1990, because it was in very poor condition, it wasn't used as a water tower in the 50s, and much of it was falling apart after the revolution, and then some private investors took it and turned it into a museum. And now every floor has a different museum, and everything on top culminates with you can enter into the water basin. So they cut an entrance into the old tank, and you can have a look how it looked inside. It's a very interesting museum. It takes some 2 hours if you have a guide, because there are a lot of items to see around. But I took you here not for the water tower, though it's great. I took you to see this place, which is the most visited place by tourists in Arad. Doesn't seem so now, they come later, because this is the reconciliation park. And here we talk about a reconciliation between Romania and Hungary, between Romanians and Hungarians. And it's interesting also how it came to existence, this place, because everything started with this beautiful monument that we have here. This is a monument erected in 1891, and
another medieval sign. This lady is wearing chainmail.
Yes. So she represents the Hungarian nation. The chain nail that you see there, and also the sword and also the shield are related to medieval Hungary, to the times of Máté Corvin, to the times of to the glory times of the Hungarian kingdom, if you like. So this is a monument erected to celebrate 1,000 years since the Hungarians came to Europe. The Hungarians came around the year 896, so by 1896, 1,000 years later, all over Hungary they were erecting monuments, building churches, things that were important to mark those 1,000 years since they come to Europe. And here, since we were in Arad, on the base you can see the faces of those 13 generals that were executed. And you see there are some flowers and also some candles, because like I said, groups of students are coming from Hungary to Arad, and they visit this place. To imagine, Hungary has 3 national holidays. It is the 15th of March, when the revolution in 1848 started. It's August 20th, the day of Saint Stephen, their king that turned Hungarians to a Christian nation. Yes. And it's October 6th, the day when these generals were executed in Arad. Wow. So think about it, from 3 national holidays, 2 are related to the revolution from 1848, and one of them it's directly related to Arad. So now you understand why this place is so important for the Hungarian nation. Initially, the monument was erected in the space behind the theater, in that square. It's called Liberty, the Liberty Monument. And around, there are several themes, several allegories that are talking about how the Hungarian nation won their freedom. But as Arad became part of Romania, in 1926, the Romanian government unfortunately decided to demolish the monument. Fortunately, they preserved it, so they didn't lost it. So in 2004, when the debate was on to replace it somewhere, they couldn't put it back where it was initially, because the communists put another statue there. And then they decided to create this park here. They said, okay, we'll put one side a symbol of the Hungarian nation, on the other side a symbol of the Romanian nation, but there was a problem with that. There was no symbol of the Romanian nation. No problem, they called for the sculptor who was in charge back then with these public things for the Romanian government, and he made an Arch de Triomphe, or triumphal arch, where we have depicted revolutionaries from the Romanian side of the 1848 revolution. So I've talked about him so much, it's about time to show you where he lived. This was a house of the Serbian guy that made the Catholic Church, Milan Tabaković, as I called him. You can see there elements that have to do with the local Freemasons. He was also part of that movement. And we also have a memorial plaque which was put here by the Order of Architects from Serbia, because he spent his last years in Novi Sad. One of his sons, Jorge, he went on his steps and became an architect, so he moved there, and that's why the Serbians pay the respect to him. Otherwise, we see here something that is brand new. This square, it's like this only for a few days. They worked on it some years, and this was a marketplace. And this is the former Orthodox Cathedral of Arad. Former because there's also the new one. Outside, it's Baroque, and it's still an Orthodox church. And you know the relationship of Baroque being used by the Catholic Church as a way of bringing people back to faith. Yes. Well, it's not a single example. Many Orthodox churches made in the 18th century, 19th century around here are Baroque. Inside, it's the normal Byzantine interior that you find in an Orthodox church, but sometimes for some, well, not for us because we're used to it, the exterior, it's very much Baroque.
Even on the outside, these mosaics
are Byzantine. Yeah, you're right, you're right.
I love the smell of this church.
Yes, it's incense. So Orthodox use a lot of incense in their rituals. And also I want to take this occasion to explain you a bit about the differences, the obvious differences between an interior of an Orthodox church compared to, let's say, a Catholic church, which people are more accustomed. I would start with what you see. There are no benches, so there are no places to sit in the main nave. People mostly in an Orthodox church, they stand or they're on their knees. We have only on the sides some sitting places,
yes,
but
the sitting places have some names?
Yes, they are rented, so it's not expensive, but they're hard to get because you have priority. Once you got a chair, you have priority to rent it back next year. So practically, yeah, only if someone goes to the other side, then you'll get a free chair. They're not expensive, but they're hard to get. And in some places, like for instance in Ukraine, they don't have those as well. So they're totally lacking places where to sit. To make it even more interesting, as people stand, a normal religious service in an Orthodox church takes over 2 hours, up to 3 hours.
Wow.
So imagine to stand, and these are the ordinary ones. If you come for Easter, well, it starts at, I think it's 8 p.m. and it goes up until 3 or 4 a.m. And it's a very intricate and interesting to see ritual. Don't think it's so different from the Catholic world. Remember that they came from the same root, they split in 1054,
yes.
And the main things in the Orthodox and the Catholic Church are the same. The sacraments are the same. The saints, the classical ones, I mean, because in between both sides have got some new saints in their pantheon. So yeah, basically they are the same, only they have slight differences, like no benches, or you can't see the altar. Yeah, in a Catholic church you see all the way. Here the altar table sits behind that wooden wall, which we call iconostas because it's filled with icons, and behind that women are not allowed.
Never?
Never. We as ordinary men, we can go only when invited, and only using the side doors. In the middle, where the altar table sits, only people that were consecrated, only priests or kings can go. We don't have kings anymore, so we stick with priests. So these are, it's again that separation that you encounter in the Temple of Jerusalem, if you like. Like the holiest, only where only special priest people could go in. The Orthodox keep that sacred space. You notice that there are no statues, so here we talk only about 2D representations of the saints, a lot of frescoes. All the churches are painted with frescoes, and this is also very strictly regulated. The frescoes and also the icons on the iconostas, you have the same themes, the same icons on the same spot in all the churches. They have canons, they have rules for this, and it's very strictly regulated.
Who made these canons?
The church, of course.
But when?
Over time, it was an evolution. and it differs also from different country to different country. Maybe we should explain for people why they call it, some people, English speakers especially, they call it the denomination Greek Orthodox. And here we talk about Romanian Orthodox, and you know about Russian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, Bulgarian, and so on. Well, they're all the same, only each of them founded a national church with their own patriarch. So it's a matter of organizing the church, but when it comes to rituals, priests can marry. In the Orthodox world, everyone can all the priests can marry. So they're basically the same, only it's a matter of national churches. And yeah, no instruments. Have a look where the organ sits normally. Here is the place for a choir. If you listen, and you probably did, to an Orthodox mass, it's very much involves. It involves very much singing. It's like a chant, like a mantra. The congregation doesn't sing that much; they sing less. But the priests, everything that they are saying, it's sung, and also they have the choir. In places where they don't have the choir, they have the cantor, someone who's giving the answers. We came around this building that actually contains the oldest synagogue that we have in Arad. We had a Jewish community here, well, probably from Turkish times, but from those times we have no idea about how many there were or how they developed, because we don't have any written recordings. So we reset their history from Austrian times, from the 1700s. The first mention about Jews here, it's in 1717. There were two families, and they grew as a community up until they peaked in the 1930s. There were some 13,000 souls in the community. And the synagogue here was made from 1827 to 1834, and back then it was still a rule that synagogues should be built not in plain sight, not at the main street. They took profit of this because the building around the synagogue was used for offices of the local community. It was like the community house, and also the school was in this place. And have a look, this narrow street that we entered, on this narrow street they were having the main entrance. This was the main entrance to the synagogue. Of course we can't get now here inside, we'll have to go around, and you'll see. We'll go through a narrow corridor into a courtyard and only then into the synagogue. This is it. Let's get past this. Well, yeah. So, if for us Christians, if we enter a church, we have to take off hats or everything. In a Jewish synagogue, it's the other way around. Actually, not only in a synagogue, in a holy place. Men have to have their head covered when we go to a synagogue, where they go to a cemetery in Jewish tradition. So normally we should wear these kippahs here, but as the synagogue is used only on very rare occasions, the Torah is not here. And again, something special in Jewish tradition. If the Torah is not here, the place is not that it isn't considered holy, but you don't have to have the kippahs. So it's only a special place, a special gathering place. Actually, the synagogue is basically also a gathering place, not only a place of worship. What you see around, this was made by the local community in the beginning of the 19th century. And there's another thing. This is a special synagogue. This is a reformed synagogue. So the Jewish community in Europe at some point also had their progressive branches. And here, back then in Hungary, this took the form of the neologue, branch. So the neologues were like Protestants, if you like, but they never called themselves like that. But they were introducing some innovation and some new things in the way they did their rituals, and also how they wanted to get integrated into society, and also how they made their synagogues. Because normally that podium that you see there, I'm going to show you. So normally what we have here, this bima, this is how it's called. This is the place from where the Torah gets to be read. And this sits in an orthodox, in a normal synagogue, somewhere in the middle. But here, as you can see, they built like in a church. I hope someone will not get very disturbed by this comparison. But they pushed it all the way to the front and put the bima on top of it. And I've done this several times, so I rehearsed this. If you look back, here you see an organ. You haven't seen it in the Orthodox Church. You see it in the Neolog synagogue. And if you look for it in the Orthodox synagogue, you won't see it because they don't have it. So they introduced instruments into the music. Yeah, piano. It's recently bought here. They use it more for concerts nowadays. On very rare occasions, they use it as a synagogue, as a proper synagogue. Also needs to be restored, though it looks beautiful. It has a certain aura, so old as it is. Slowly we have to intervene, but it's complicated. Probably the municipality will do it, because the community, they can't afford this. Less than 300 people are now in the local Jewish community. They're very open-minded. They use the place, like I said, for other things. And they let us in on every occasion when we come with tourists, or there are people who come to visit their places of birth. But otherwise, I don't see how they can't afford to restore this.
It's amazing. These windows there from the street looks like normal flats. It's like hidden place.
It's a hidden place. Yeah, you're right. And yeah, something else. Women are separated. So normally in a synagogue, women sit on the first floor, and this is the space for men. Not anymore. They don't do that anymore. And this is so separated that women have a separate entrance. So to get upstairs, there was a separate entrance. This is the new Orthodox cathedral. Well, it's actually the one that replaced the old one. And here is what I was saying earlier, that we have a lot of frescoes, and it's a lot of gold leaf used. Some half a hectare, like some 5,000 square meter of gold leaf was used to decorate the interior of this church. That was made after 1990. In communism, we didn't invest at all in churches. But after 1990, we did a lot of churches. And for Arad, this was the biggest investment. Have a look. Benches. Yeah. Without names, yes. Because this shows the interaction between several people. And even the Orthodox, and though the Orthodox tradition says that people stay or they stand or they knee, the church introduces now more and more places to sit, because many of the believers, many of the worshippers are elderly people, and yeah, physically it's sometimes challenging to stand for several hours. So even in a cathedral, and this is a proper cathedral, like we have the Archbishop of Arad that comes here, and I hope I'm not mistaking, I think that's his seat, the bishop's seat. This is, by the way, the difference. I don't know if I should explain this for our viewers, but the difference between a cathedral and a big church. A cathedral has the cathedra, the chair of the bishop. If you have the chair in a church, then that's a cathedral. If not, it's only a beautiful big church. Because I don't know how it is in Poland, but here people, they seem to name all the big churches cathedrals.
No, in Poland they divide, they call it properly. But also you have the saying, you're saying something ex cathedra, so it's from the position.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So we call the other one the old cathedral, and this one the new cathedral. Well, correct would be cathedral and former cathedral. I took you here for the end of the tour. Actually, we should have started from here to do it chronologically, to establish a timeline, because this was more than 150 years the heart of the city. So after Arad was conquered by the Habsburgs from the Ottoman Turks, that happened around the year 1700, this is the place where they established the city center. This was the main marketplace where the blue building sits there. We were having the old city hall, which got replaced by the new one. Then, if we turn, we are actually seeing here the back of the theater building. And imagine that the Catholic church, that beautiful Catholic church that we saw, sits in front of it. But when the theater wasn't here, the Catholic church in a mainly Catholic city, together with the city hall, were guarding the main marketplace. And now we come to something that I've told you earlier, about that beautiful boulevard that you saw in the middle of Arad. Well, we don't know. Again, it's a legend. We have to work on the facts. But people say that that boulevard emerged organically. It wasn't planned by an architect. You know, after they rebuilt Paris, after the plans of Haussmann, with those wide boulevards on which you can't establish barricades and so on, all the cities, or many cities in Europe started using that layout. Well, it wasn't the case here, because what people say is that those who didn't have place to sell on the main marketplace, they put their carts back to back towards north, and as they did this more than 100 years, at some point a street was formed as buildings were made on the side. And so they say that this emerged naturally as a consequence that Arad was an important marketplace on the lower Miloš. Dan, thank you very much for this beautiful trip. If you want to have Dan as your guide in Arad, Timisoara, or Romania generally, in the description of this movie you have his mobile phone, so you can contact him by WhatsApp and arrange your own beautiful trip in Romania. Thank you. It was a pleasure.